is currently proposing adopting a drug formulary, which basically means a list of prescription drugs that Medicaid would cover. Currently, that's not permitted as part of Medicaid. And this seems like the kind of thing that a conservative administration would be interested in approving. It's very, very focused on controlling costs, that sort of thing. But the Trump administration has expressed skepticism about approving Massachusetts' request to do this. So that's one kind of interesting case of tension that we might watch. The other is in Idaho, where the state of Idaho has a proposal to basically allow insurance companies to sell health insurance plans that don't comply with the ACA. Again, given the Trump administration's hesitancy about the ACA, we might think they would be excited about this prospect, but they've so far been a little lukewarm towards it. They've basically said that Idaho can't do exactly what it wants. Maybe it can do something else that might have similar effects. But again, these are two Republican-led states that are pushing back and in some conflict with the federal government on health policy. What are some other policy areas that we might watch here? So one that Elizabeth and I have written a little bit about that we're paying attention to is education. So if we think back to the confirmation of Betsy DeVos to be the education secretary about a year ago, that was very contentious, in part because there were Republican senators, two of whom, Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, ended up voting against DeVos, who heard from a lot of their constituents that Secretary DeVos's pro-charter school, pro-school choice agenda would not necessarily work well for states with large rural populations. And so that's one place where we might see more tension. And then lastly is some interesting environmental policy areas. So we saw, I think earlier this year, the Trump administration propose to expand offshore drilling. And immediately, the state of Florida said, we don't want this. Again, it's Florida, led by Republican Governor Rick Scott. And then the Trump administration changed its proposal to exempt Florida from the expansion. So again, lots of interesting places to watch as Republican-led states either go along with or push back against what the federal government is up to. So I will stop there, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Molly. Questions for Molly?
Yeah.
Was there significant supernational reaction to the repeal of the individual mandate at all?
So in December, when so as part of the tax bill that was passed in December, Republicans were successful at repealing the individual mandate. We haven't collected the newspaper data, but from just kind of paying attention to this, I don't think there was nearly as much, and there are a couple of reasons for that. Number one, the individual mandate doesn't necessarily have effects that differ a lot across states because everyone was subject to it. So it's not the case that because you live in Nevada, which has expanded Medicaid, versus living in a state that hasn't, you're going to feel really different effects of the policy. The other reason is because the individual mandate was far and away the least popular part of the Affordable Care Act. People hate being told they have to do things like buy insurance. And so even as other parts of the law grew in popularity in the face of Republican efforts to repeal it last year, so we saw things like the protections for pre-existing conditions become more popular and that sort of thing. Support for the individual mandate never really got more popular. And so even for governors who are generally in favor of keeping the Medicaid expansion and other parts of the ACA, it would be a pretty hard political lift to come out in favor of the least popular part of the law. Yeah?
What was the impact of the Freedom Coalition in Congress and their impact on the states where they were present?
It's a good question. And one thing that we did a little bit of work on and never really came to a clear explanation of was, so there were Freedom Caucus members from a number of states who were pushing for this amendment that is ultimately part of what got the bill across the finish line in the House that would provide state-based flexibility. And in that case, we saw some House members who weren't part of the Freedom Caucus align with the Freedom Caucus, despite the fact that it would be quite unpopular in their states. So I think at the end of the day, a big part of this story is just that this was a major Republican policy promise that folks in Congress really felt like they had to follow through on, and they were willing to do, in some cases, kind of whatever it took legislatively to try and get across the finish line. But it's an interesting thing to think about, and I think the Freedom Caucus was quite influential in how this went through Congress. Yeah.
I want to say a question, but I don't know how to word it right, so maybe you can help me.
I can do my best.
What do you think about political figures that are in politics for like a long time, and then they try to use that stuff in their benefit? But like, for example, the health care that we were talking about that one. But let's say that they were against it, but they said they were for it, and then later on they said that they were against it. Do you think that the longer you are in politics, the less that works in your favor?
So I certainly think the longer one's political career lasts, the more likely it is you're going to find yourself in situations that pressure you to take one position versus a different position.
Yeah, like Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. So I mean, this was quite famously happened to John Kerry in the 2004 presidential election. He was for it, and then he was against it, and he was accused of flip-flopping. So I think just the longer you have a political career, the more likely that is to come up. And then the question of, well, does it matter, is really going to depend on your particular electoral situation at a given time. So it'll be really interesting, for instance, to watch whether Senator Heller's going from being against repeal to being pretty aggressively pro-repeal over the span of just a couple of months in 2017, whether that has any implications for his ability to win re-election here in Nevada this year. And I don't know. You all are more Nevada political experts than I am, but that'll be, I think, an interesting thing to watch. Yeah, you're welcome.
Good question.
Yeah.
So right now, the federal government's still paying a big chunk of the Medicaid expansion. Do you think these attitudes are going to change as the states are required to pick up more of the tab?
I think that's potentially true. One of the things that was really interesting to watch governors take a position on, and senators from states, Republican senators from states that had expanded Medicaid, was during the debate over how long the period over which the Medicaid expansion would phase out would be. So there was, will it phase out over 5 years? Will it phase out over 10 years? That sort of thing. And I do think it's possible that as states become more responsible for covering more of the Medicaid expansion, it will become less popular. But at the same time, I think many people regard the Medicaid expansion as the most successful part of the law. And particularly as it's also proven to be a part of the law that's been less susceptible to kind of administrative change at the federal level. That's changing a little bit with the push towards implementing work requirements for Medicaid, which the Trump administration has started to do administratively. But it'll certainly be interesting to watch, and including, to get back to something I mentioned in the talk, the fact that there are some of these governors who were the highest profile supporters of keeping the Medicaid expansion won't still be in office. They're term limited out. So it's hard to say kind of what the next order consequences of what we're looking at here will be. But I do, one of the big takeaways that I think we've had from this project so far is that this activism by governors was really relevant in the debate.
All right, I got another one for you.
Okay, go for it.
So do you think part of the struggles for Republicans, repeal was the easy part, but the replace part Because, you know, at the end of the day, this is a Republican, started as a Republican idea as the alternative to Clinton care.
Yes,
Romney
yes.
is the first to do it as in Massachusetts.
Yeah, so I do think, and if we go back all the way to the beginning of the talk, when I talk about what happened in January of 2017, this question of whether Republicans were going to repeal and replace at the same time, or repeal now and replace later, was actually a big sticking point. And from my perspective, that was kind of the place where things really started to go off the rails for Republican efforts. I don't think that Republicans, particularly Paul Ryan in the House, thought he was going to have as much trouble as he did uniting his caucus behind kind of a grand strategy, not even the particulars. So there was one part of the Republican conference in the House who said, if we repeal the bill now, but give ourselves 2 years to come up with a replacement, we're never actually going to repeal the bill. We're going to say we did it, but we're just going to keep kicking the can down the road. There was another part of the House Republican Conference who said, if we repeal the bill now without a replacement, we're never actually going to replace the law. And the sort of that first group tended to be kind of the Freedom Caucus types. That second group tended to be more moderate establishment Republicans. And together, they had enough votes to basically force some sort of agreement, which ended up being, we're going to repeal and replace at the same time, which proved to be really hard to do. Yes?
You're dealing with Congress, you're dealing with the government. Do you think voters are even cognizant of any of this?
So, I mean, I think that because the ACA was sort of a high enough profile issue, that I do think that registered with a lot of voters, that there was activity on this issue, that there was the potential that the law was going to be repealed. Whether voters were actually distinguishing between what the governors wanted and what Congress wanted, I think am also sort of skeptical, and I think a lot of the research I talked about supports me in that skepticism. But to the extent that voters would identify what was happening with Republicans, I think they are definitely capable of doing that, but not necessarily assigning credit or blame specifically across the levels of government.
Any other questions for Molly? All right, we can all get home and get the hockey game starts in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On our next edition of In Your Neighborhood, Commissioner Lawrence Wheatley and I are high above the strip at the High Roller Observation Wheel. That's In Your Neighborhood, right here on Clark County Television.
Whoa, that's an earthquake. Thanks, Captain Obvious. You think you know everything about earthquakes? Because I do. Oh, really? Which state has the most earthquakes after Alaska, California, and Hawaii? Yeah, Nevada. And I happen to know that if a big one hits, you want to drop, find cover, and hold on until the shaking stops. Most injuries happen during earthquakes because of falling objects. Don't put heavy objects above your bed. Fasten bookshelves and water heaters to walls. Yeah, and put the heaviest items right on the floor or on the lowest shelves. Go to Clark County's website for more earthquake safety tips. Told you I knew everything.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
After the sun sets, the shooting complex comes alive on Wednesday and Thursday evenings during the summer months. Located at the end of North Decatur Boulevard, the incomparable field lighting illuminates the base of the Sheep Mountain Range and can be seen for miles around. This provides recreational shooters the opportunity to take advantage of evening hours to escape summer's oppressive temperatures. The ranges for rifle and pistol shooting, along with trap, skeet, 5-stand, and archery, come to life and are available until 10 p.m. for your shooting enjoyment. Our vigilant range safety officers are always on hand to assist and keep you safe. Seasonal league activities are also available for archery, trap, skeet, and rimfire. All leagues are structured to be social, family-friendly, and ideal for breaking into the recreational shooting sports. While at the complex, take advantage of the renowned John Mull's Roadkill Grill, located in the Shotgun Center. Their kitchen provides some of the finest naturally smoked meat selections, such as brisket, ribs, and hot legs, accompanied by unique and delicious homemade side dishes. It just doesn't get any better. Gather up the family, friends, neighbors, or business associates, and come out and see us on a Wednesday or Thursday night real soon at the Clark County Shooting Complex, Nevada's only 5-star rated outdoor recreational shooting facility. On the next edition of Clark County Chronicles, the nation's newest freeway opens as Interstate 11 rolls around Boulder City. Commissioner Larry Brown is the unofficial Mr. Transportation, and we chat with the elected official from District C, and a new park in District F is already a hit for Southern Highlands community members. Those stories and more coming up on the next edition of Clark County Chronicles, right here on Clark County Television.
Although my car almost tipped over on its top, it didn't. So you can see I'm floating down in the middle of this weather. I've called 911. They told me to roll down my windows and stay in the car, and hopefully they'll be here soon.
I was born here in Las Vegas in 1913.
Born in Las Vegas in 1936.
August 1931.
October 1953.
Born here on February 22nd.
I've been here since the first day of 1950.
Came to Las Vegas in 1949.
I came to Las Vegas in 1953.
October 3rd, 1949.
1952 September.
I moved here in 1955.
Came to Las Vegas in 1943.
In 1961.
I was born here in Clark County before Las Vegas.
Gail and I were going together, and we were at an air show. And all of a sudden, over the loudspeaker, it came, all military personnel is to return to Las Vegas Army Airfield immediately.
And then they came on and said that Pearl Harbor had been bombed.
It was just a madhouse, people leaving, trying to find ways to get back to town. There were no buses or anything like that.
The exodus of kids at this air show was amazing.
I remember going out and hawking newspapers to the people that were coming back.
And I made some pretty good money because we put out several extras and people were paying me quarter, 50 cents for a newspaper, and it sold for a nickel.
We just turned on a radio at the time. We thought at first it was another Orson Welles thing.
I mean, nobody could really believe it. You know, they thought, well, this can't be possible. But
I don't really think too many people on December 7th, 41 really realized what was happening to us.
Then when the next day, when President Roosevelt came on the radio, we were going to war. And
they needed workers for war work. And so a lot of kids quit school and went to work.
Well, we quit high school. We quit our last year of high school and joined the Navy.
Then when I graduated from high school, I went to work out at the magnesium plant. And I worked out there for a while until my number came up in the draft, and then I went to the Army.
I got drafted in April 1943. And
Daddy went to sign up and they said, no, we won't take you because running a radio station is a vital industry. And if the Japanese bomb the West Coast, the only way we will have of controlling evacuation would be Radio Kino.
The war effort was enveloping. Everyone was affected by it.
Leather, tires, gasoline, everything was rationed.
A milk delivery, believe it or not, as part of the war effort, they hooked the horses up to trucks.
During the war, we had no lumber, no critical materials to sell, and Dad just barely held on.
Housing was very scarce. There were boxes and tents all along the Boulder Highway. And
in fact, we had drives where we would pick up scrap and send it. Our pictures in the annual are all group pictures because paper was rationed, printing was rationed, ink was rationed, film was rationed, and so we were really lucky to even have an annual to put out.
During the war, when you crossed the dam from the Nevada side to Arizona, Nevada, you were required to have your windows rolled up, and you were escorted across the dam by an armed guard.
When you go over Hoover Dam, you better go over 10,000 feet, otherwise you'll be shot down. Because the dam was heavily guarded.
When we came down off the hill to the deal, there were some big guard gates there, and there was Marines there with rifles. Bunker on the hill on the opposite side on Arizona was still manned.
The Army said that if you don't close the cat houses, why, we're going to put the town off limits. And of course, they thought that there was more money to be made, you know, with the soldiers coming into town. And of course, we didn't want the soldiers locked out of town, for crying out loud.
Hi, I'm Governor Brian Sandoval. Public safety is a topmost concern for me, and it's a well-known fact that a victim's chance of survival is greatest within a short period following severe trauma. To help our drivers on the roadway, I'm proud to support the Yellow Dot program. Here to present the program to Southern Nevada is Assemblyman Derek Armstrong.
Roadway accidents happen every day. To assist incident victims who are unable to communicate or can't remember important medical information, Yellow Dot helps first responders react as quickly as possible at accident scenes by providing valuable medical information about drivers and their passengers. To get started with the program, you can pick up a free Yellow Dot kit at participating locations or request a kit via mail by calling 702-676-1754.
Thank you for calling the Jury Services Office.
You haven't really lived until you've had a hand in justice. Serve on a jury. Be sure to respond if you get a jury summons and play a role to ensure that justice is fairly served.
Coming up on our next edition of County Critters, I'll tell you about some astonishing animals and some dedicated people. Those and more on our next episode of County Critters right here on Clark County Television.
You're watching Clark County Television, our community, our home, Clark County, Nevada.
I'm happy to be doing this, sad that we're having to do this. There's just so much tragedy that surrounds that night in Las Vegas.
Inside a quilting shop nestled in the back of a Las Vegas strip mall, a group of women meet. They are members of the Las Vegas Modern Quilt Guild.
I was watching television and they broke in on with immediately at 10:30 when it happened, and it was like my heart was stabbed because this is my home.
They are working on a project called Quilts for Vegas. Hundreds of handmade quilts that take hours to stitch together. Quilts that will eventually be given to those who were there that October 1st night.
We posted on our Instagram, we posted on our Facebook that we're starting this project, Quilts for Vegas, and asked for quilters to help us out. If they could send us fabric, if they could send us blocks, quilt tops, whole quilts, whatever they could do to help us out on this project.
Donations came in from all over the country, and the Las Vegas Modern Quilt Guild went to work.
I think we were all working through our own pain and our own tragedy by working on these quilts and trying to make sense of the situation that is senseless.
To show their support and love, their grief and warmth, and show how fabric, thread, and a lot of heart can help create a Vegas strong.
Well, quilts are hugs, and we're not hugging any of these people physically, but we are hugging them in the way we know how to do it.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Mitch Truswell. Like squares of cloth that become a quilt, members of our Las Vegas community have banded together, hoping to create comfort from tragedy. Tonight, we focus on two primary concerns in the months following 1 October, mental health and money. They are surprisingly intertwined. We've gathered together a panel of mental health professionals to discuss ongoing concerns, needs, and resources. And we'll look at financial issues that may arise as a result of this trauma. Amid the experts and advice, you'll also hear the stories of those who have been forever changed by what happened that October night.
I made it my personal mission every day to round on every victim, every day. It was a lot easier for me to have conversations with them because I was there, at least in my mind, and because I could relate to what happened.
Tracy Szymanski is the Director of Guest Services at Sunrise Hospital. She is also a 1 October survivor.
So Jason Aldean started this third song, and we were contemplating leaving, actually, and we heard what we thought were fireworks. So we kind of stood up and started packing our chairs, and all of a sudden, the security officer who was off to our right started screaming, "Turn around, run the other way, active shooter." We ran out the back and behind the bleachers, through all of the food vendors, and then exited off to the side street and started running towards Hooters. As I was walking, I called one of our administrators and said, you know, everybody knew I was going to the concert. It's something I talk about leading up to it every year. So everybody knew I was going, and I said, you know, I'm at the concert. If I've seen 10 people, I know I've seen more than 100, and we're going to get hit pretty hard.
Szymanski went straight to the hospital. A coworker picked her up.
I checked in at the Incident Command Center, and I went down to the emergency room to see what I could do to help. And I had no idea and was not prepared for what I saw.
Staff at Sunrise Hospital treated more than 200 people that night. Szymanski worked with families and patients to help make them comfortable.
That's where I got my healing from. I tried not to make conversations about me, but at the same time, we were all comforting each other.
So when something like October 1, the event happens, do you have to be a first responder or someone at the concert to be affected by it?
I would think that it would be very difficult to find someone who was not affected by it. There was so much media coverage, and it was such a large tragedy, it impacted so many people that were there, but there were people who knew somebody there, who worked with somebody who was there or had a family member there, worked there. It would be hard to find, I think, people who weren't affected.
We talk so much about the first responders. Angela, this is something, not everybody who responded that night is considered a first responder. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that?
Do you mean as in the civilian heroes that helped?
Civilian heroes, but also some of even the 911 calls.
Yeah, and I consider them our first responders. They're the ones who take the initial calls. So they're the ones that initially knew something was going on.
We hear something over the radio. One of our units over the radio said that he heard shots fired. At the time, we're like, okay. He's like, dispatch, do you have any calls? We didn't have any when he said shots fired, but within 60 seconds, our call volume just went through the roof.
Letha Lofton was among those working in the Las Vegas Fire 911 Communications Center on the night of 1 October.
We're trained to stay on that line to help people. We're trained to help people until the paramedics get there. But when you have a flood of calls coming in and all of these people are injured and you don't want to hang up, so we have to give them basic instructions like how to control the bleeding, or I need to know where you are, and they're battling with themselves, with their morals, like, do I hang up this phone because I have this other person who we don't know what's wrong with them. We don't know if they're shot. And then we still have the rest of the valley. We still have all of Las Vegas that's calling in 911. So those are the things that they went through that night. A lot of fear, a lot of doubt, a lot of hurt, pain. I don't think because I was in autopilot mode, which I think a lot of us were, we didn't realize the impact of it, how it affected us until when I pulled up at home and I sat in my car and I cried for about an hour.
Counseling and peer support were made available, but Lofton says certain calls that used to be standard can still trigger an emotional response.
We helped as many people as we could. There's 22,000 people there. For those other people, they made it. So we helped some people. People that we couldn't help, yes, it hurts, but that's a part of our job. We do the best that we can do.
What would you say are the signs of someone who is struggling, since it is so widespread and we all know someone who knows someone, some of us closer than others? What are those signs? What should we be looking for?
If you're looking strictly down the PTSD sort of guidelines, you're looking for, I mean, I think stereotypically it's, you know, flashbacks and bad dreams of the incident. And I think that's the one that if we don't see that, we don't really think a lot is going on. But there are issues like chronic pain is actually one of the precursors to PTSD. There's a lot of avoidance, what we call a hyperstartle response, so somebody jumps to a noise or things like that. Sort of the difficult part with PTSD is that there are so many different types of triggers for it, and they're so small, there's no way to say, here's X, Y, and Z to do to prevent it. It can be anything associated with any of the senses. So you hear a song that was played, not even that night, but by that artist, a smell of food that was cooking in the background, the smell of grass. I mean, it can be any number of things that just out of the blue can kind of trigger it.
Wow. Is that something that you've experienced at Las Vegas Fire in terms of the first responders that were there that night coming saying, I need some time off, there are some triggers, it's getting too difficult to work?
Well, I think it's almost the opposite. I think it's what you were speaking to. People want to just move on and past it, even though it's not going to go away. You know, so they try to jump right back in it. I mean, but for a lot of our folks, for fire, military, police, all of us want to just suck it up and soldier on and pretend like nothing's wrong. You know, where in the meantime, you know, they're suffering.
The police department has opened up a window that allows chaplains to come and be a resource for the officers, for other employees of Metro, and for their families.
Pastor Dean Sanner is the lead chaplain for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's Police Chaplain Program. Chaplains, like Sanner, work hand in hand with the department's Police Employee Assistance Program, or PEAP, offering comfort, advice, and counseling to officers and their families who are affected by tragedy.
It's a sacred privilege, too, because we're in their lives. They allow us in their lives. We go to briefings, you know, we ride along, we talk to the officers and the supervisors, anybody that needs help, but it's all confidential. But when they open that window and open that door, it's something that they don't open to just anybody.
The program started in 2005 with about 5 members of local clergy who went through a specialized training program. Now there are almost 24 chaplains. They are on call 24 hours a day. All of them are volunteers.
Well, in October 1, obviously it was a traumatic night for everybody. We had many police chaplains that were out. I was out all night long at hospitals. Then we went over to Metro headquarters. Since then, part of what we do is we continue to be visible and available. Police officers keep everything to themselves. And unfortunately, when they do that, it starts to build up, and that's what results in the high suicide rate for officers. We're trying to break that culture or change that culture in the department to basically let officers know, hey, if you're getting overwhelmed, you're human. If you deal with this in a healthy way, the healthy way is by talking about it. The healthy way is by admitting the truth about it and admitting how it's affecting you. And if you do that, there is help and there is hope. And that's what we want people to know. There's hope for dealing with the trauma and the difficulties that the officers face, and we want to be there as a support.
You can't avoid it because it's going to come back, is what I'm hearing, at some point. What can we do?
As community members?
As a community member, not experts, but what can we do? Do you bring it up? Do you say, what's the proper way to, I don't know, kind of broach the subject? Are you okay?
I think you're looking for changes in that person, something, you know, maybe they're doing things differently than they used to do. Maybe they were very outgoing and now they're withdrawn, because everyone's response is so individualized.
Right.
And so I think it is okay to note, say, I've noticed that, you know, or I'm wondering if.
And I also think one of the biggest things we need to remember, we were talking about it earlier, is even if you weren't there, you could still be affected. And we try to pretend, well, I should be okay because I didn't get shot at, I should be fine. It's okay not to be okay, and it's okay to reach out for help even if you weren't at that concert. That event threatened the security of all of us who live here. Right. And people who live in any city, really, anywhere. It made it real that that can happen in this community.
And I think that's one of the important things that we're talking about. What do we do as a community? And for me, I think there's a couple of things. The first one is we have to be patient. Because we have yet to see the worst of the effects of this.
Explain that.
So PTSD doesn't always initially happen right at the time of an event. Typically, it's an average of about 3 months post-event that the symptoms really start coming out. It can take years for that to happen, though. So although we're 9 months out or however far out, we're actually just in the very beginning stages of this. And so when we say, well, we want to help, you know, the people that were impacted by it and we want to help their families, one of the things I would say is let's be careful that we're going to help them the right way. Right. So in instances with, say, grief and loss or with trauma, the reactions are very similar. Somebody will say, hey, Angela's a good friend of mine and I see her upset or struggling. My initial reaction or inclination is everything's going to be okay, I'm going to help her, I'm going to fix her, because it relieves my own anxiety about watching somebody I care about that way. So realistically, we need to be patient, and the best thing you can do is let somebody feel bad, let somebody struggle. They have to go through it. It's uncomfortable and it doesn't look great and it's really heartbreaking, but that's really one of the most therapeutic things we do.
We had already had employee assistance program available to our team members, and they deal with a great deal of traumatic events here every day. October 1 could not prepare anybody for those services that were needed, but we knew we had to get a resource center provided to our employees immediately.
Nicole Ritz is the Vice President of Human Resources at Sunrise Hospital.
We had a 24/7 resource center here for 3.5 weeks. You don't know what kind of triggers, I've learned this, you don't know what's going to trigger somebody to need those services.
Sunrise flew in counselors who specialize in post-traumatic stress.
I called them our knights in shining armor because they just came and they stayed for weeks.
To assist the hospital's 3,200 employees, many who just showed up that night wanting to help.
Our employees, we didn't have to ask them to come. They came, and it was nothing short of remarkable. And our job as their senior team is to take care of them when they need it the most.
the most therapeutic or most healing thing a victim can do is to talk about it. Mm-hmm. That's for PTSD, the treatment of PTSD is talk therapy and medications. The interesting thing is that the medications given for PTSD are typically antidepressants, and then medications for anxiety. Depression is also one of those things we really struggle to talk about. It's kind of like if I don't have an explanation for the way I'm feeling, and people that start developing these symptoms want to explain it as something else. Oh, I've got a headache, and headaches are really common in PTSD as precursor to symptom manifestation. So just being able to kind of, I'm going to talk about it, the more you talk about it, the more you're just going to do it in intervals. Hey, this is as far as I'm comfortable with, and as community members or family members or friends of those people that went through that, what we have to make sure is we're not pushing for the story. We're just being the outlet for what they need us, and then we're just supportive. You know what, I'm sorry, I can't imagine what that had been like.
Okay. And the way it was always explained to me is basically the more you talk about it, the less power and emotion is attached. And on the flip side, some people will be okay, and that's okay too.
Right.
You know, if you feel okay, that's okay too.
Right.
So we had a lot of people feeling guilty because they didn't feel bad. Not bad, I mean, they felt bad about the incident, but they weren't exhibiting those symptoms, so then they thought something was wrong with them because they weren't. And we're all telling them, you should be, you know, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. And when it didn't happen, they're like, what's wrong with me? That stuff's not happening.
What should we be thinking about as the 1-year anniversary comes up?
Well, I think we do know from other events and from the research that any reminding event, it can be the birthday of the person, it can be the anniversary of the event or the 1-year mark, is a time when people are going to possibly have a stronger reaction or find themselves kind of back in that moment.
The 1-year anniversary is also an important deadline. Clark County Assistant County Manager Kevin Schiller oversees the Las Vegas Strong Resiliency Center, a free and confidential resource center for residents, visitors, and responders.
That anniversary date becomes a deadline for those to register for the reimbursement and for the financial assistance to the victims of crime. So that is really the key date we've been focused on.
The Nevada Victims of Crime program can financially assist any person who attended the concert the night of the shooting, no matter where they reside. But the person must register for the program within 1 year of the incident. Staff at the Resiliency Center can help with registration.
My message is absolutely register, even if you're going through your days and you're fine and you don't think you need any services or assistance. We really want to get you registered, because in the event something does come up or there's issues that arise, once you're registered, you still are eligible, and we don't want to lose that for anybody that was in attendance or anybody that's eligible.
Workers' comp is not going to help most of these people. I mean, I think there's a 3-month window in there, first of all, but it doesn't cover this kind of stuff.
It doesn't unless you were directly there when the shooting was happening. Like if your life was directly in danger, then you can make a case. And it has to be filed within 3 months.
So we're past that.
Right. So that is something we need to change. It was after the Parkland shooting when Florida's legislation changed, and we know ours doesn't meet annually. Right. So hopefully with the next legislation meeting, we can push something like that through so we can make sure that people are getting the help and care they need. Right. We treat the mental health side of workers' comp is no different than the physical side. So you still have the 90 days as you would if it was a broken foot or a bad back.
Right.
But we know it's different. You know, the duration's different. Like you said, the onset's different. There is such a thing called late onset PTSD. So there's all these other factors that we have to consider when we're looking at this. So hopefully we can get that changed. I mean, that's the goal. It's going to affect more than first responders. It'll affect the people that were working in the vendors, the hotel staff, everyone that was out there. So we need to push for that.
We had cases where people were working at this event and they were injured. They may not have been physically injured, but they did have mental health injuries.
Tennille Pereira is an attorney with the Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada who is working out of the Vegas Strong Resiliency Center, helping survivors of 1 October.
We're seeing financial issues. I call it the financial fallout.
Give us an idea. What most cases that the Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada is dealing with?
We've had family law issues that we had to help with that area. We've had probate issues. I think that one's kind of obvious. We've had employment law issues, and now it's more money issues. But from our standpoint, we see the money issues as a legal issue. So someone's being sued on a past due bill because they weren't able to pay it. Someone's house is being foreclosed upon because they weren't able to make their mortgage. We've seen lots of evictions.
Among those being helped by Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada is this woman who wanted to share her story, but asked that we conceal her identity.
Tell me what life has been like for you since October 1.
It's been very challenging. It's been a bit of a struggle. And it's been learning how to deal with the aftermath of October 1.
It has prevented you for a long time from going to work.
Yes, it has. I thought I'd be okay. You know, I have a little bit of savings, but you don't know how long you're not going to be able to go to work. You don't know when you're going to get better. There's so much anger that I had personally, that everything angered me. People angered me, and I didn't understand why this was happening to me. But day by day, you try to figure it out, that you have to make it work. And pretty soon, the power bill is going on a couple months, and they're going to come shut the power off. And house. I couldn't pay the house, so you pick and choose what you can pay. You can only borrow so much, and it just starts to, this train wreck is happening, and you're rolling.
It's a story that Pereira and her team have heard often, and they want people to know there is help.
For people that aren't aware and want to understand, can I be helped? What kind of things can you offer them?
If you're having financial troubles, come in. Let me evaluate it. There are lots of legal issues in there. There are lots of defenses. There's lots of procedures that have to be followed. Let me look at it. You know, I'm an attorney. I'll analyze it, and I'll tell you if there's something that I can do. Chances are I can do something, even if it's just negotiate.
And there are others stepping forward with financial help as well.
We wanted to help pair people with people who could guide them. In our society, we often expect people to be experts in financial matters when we don't expect them to be experts in other things.
UNLV Associate Professor of Law Benjamin Edwards, along with the president for the Institute for the Fiduciary Standard, helped found the Las Vegas Survivors Project. They organized about 40 registered financial advisors from across the nation who have agreed to volunteer a minimum of 4 hours of free financial advice to any person receiving money from the Las Vegas Victims Fund.
One of the things we do here at UNLV is we run an investor protection clinic. We don't want a survivor calling us and saying, help, I received this money from the Compassion Fund and I was taken advantage of.
One of the volunteer financial advisors is Greg Phelps, the owner of Red Rock Wealth Management. He is also a 1 October survivor.
One of the reasons I felt so drawn to this is because I've seen this in real life. I've seen this in practice and working with people, and being there, being a survivor, and knowing that maybe the person next to me, was affected, they get an award, I can help them. And I can actually go to them, and they can come to me, and we can say, okay, so let's talk about this. You have X amount of dollars. What's your situation now? How are your finances? How are you budgeting? Do you need to put the kids through college? When do you want to retire? How are you going to retire?
Phelps' experience that night has also inspired him to help work with the 501c3 Love Wins. It is a group of 1 October survivors who believe acts of random kindness can change the world.
They wake up with the same question, why am I here? I was sitting there waiting for the next bullet to hit me. Why am I here today?
I guess I would ask now, maybe final thoughts as we look at this issue and look at it in the coming months.
I would say, what do we do as a community? And part of that push is the sense of helplessness that we all feel when something this big happens. We didn't stop needing heroes. 8 o'clock in the morning on October 2nd. We didn't stop needing them when the emergency rooms were cleaned up and the sirens quieted down. We still need a whole bunch of them. And if there's really something that they want to do and you want to still be a hero, be kind to every person all the time, every day, even if they don't deserve it.
Those that I have met, they've kind of dubbed me the silent survivor, because I'm there. I want to be there for them more than I necessarily feel like I need someone there for me.
Tracy Szymanski is still the caregiver. When Jason Aldean came to Sunrise Hospital to visit victims, she was the one to walk him around.
He's everything you think he is. He's amazing. But as I left, I looked at him and I told him, I said, it was such a pleasure to meet you, but I would have preferred to have gone a lifetime without ever meeting you, if it were just because of this situation. So.
We've put the contact information for all of the resources you saw in this program on the Vegas PBS website, vegaspbs.org. You'll also find additional video content online too. Thank you to those who shared their stories and their expertise for this Vegas Strong special, and we thank you for watching.
At Clark County Parks and Recreation, with more than 100 parks, 13 community centers, and special facilities such as the Clark County Museum, Horseman's Park, the Wetlands Park Nature Preserve, and the Clark County Amphitheater, we have something for everyone. Want to learn how to play guitar, piano? Or how about putting your young one in one of our many quality early childhood programs? We have recreation centers with qualified staff on all parts of the valley. If you're thinking about becoming more active, try joining one of our many sports leagues or fitness rooms throughout the valley. Take a stroll in one of our parks, enroll in an exercise class, swim some laps in one of our pools, or just ride a bike on one of our many urban trails. Call 455-8200 to get more information about programs and learn more about our vast amenities, such as our award-winning shooting range. Clark County Parks and Recreation. It's where fun happens.
Think one piece of litter doesn't matter. Think again. When it rains, trash in our streets and sidewalks goes somewhere, like down our washes and through our flood channels, polluting our prettiest places. Worse yet, it all ends up in Lake Mead, the source of the water we drink. Do your part. Keep Clark County clean.
Our community, our home, Clark County, Nevada. Thanks for watching Clark County Television, the best access to your local government.
Good morning. I would like to call today's meeting for Wednesday, September 19th, 2018, the Board of County Commissioners to order. Ms. Amundsen.
Good morning, Commissioners. The first item on the agenda is public comments.
This is the first time set aside for public comment. Anyone wishing to address the board on any item on today's agenda, please step forward, identify yourself for the record. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing and turn it back over to staff.
The second item is the approval of the agenda after considering any additions or deletions of items. Staff has received the following requests. Item 13, UC 180332, hold to the October 3rd, 2018 BCC meeting per the applicant. Applicant is advised re-notification fees are required. Item 17, WC 18400-175, NZC 54715, hold to the October 3rd, 2018 BCC meeting per the applicant. Item 18, UC 180582,
hold to the October 3rd, 2018 BCC meeting per the applicant. Item 26, WS 18599, hold to the October 3rd, 2018 BCC meeting per the applicant. Item 27, TM 18500-140, hold to the October 3rd, 2018 BCC meeting per the applicant. Item 28, WS 18607, hold to the October 3rd, 2018 BCC meeting per the applicant. Item 29, ZC 180505, hold to the October 3rd, 2018 BCC meeting per the applicant. Item 30, VS 18506, hold until the October 3rd, 2018 BCC meeting per the applicant. Item 31, TM 18500-121, hold until the October 3rd, 2018 BCC meeting per the applicant. And item 32, ZC 18507, hold per the applicant to the November 20th, 2018 BCC meeting, which will be held at 1 p.m. The above public hearing items are going to be opened as a public hearing and immediately recessed until the dates as previously stated, with these deletions, which are items number 13, 17, 18, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, and 32. And if there are no objections from the audience, the agenda stands ready for your approval.
Do we have any additional items that someone wishes to hold or be deleted? We have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Gibson to approve the agenda with items number 13, 17, 18, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, and 32, all being held. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, please cast your votes. Commissioner Brown is an aye. Thank you. Motion passes.
Item 3, is the approval of minutes. The minutes of the August 8th, 2018 zoning meeting are ready for approval.
So moved. Commissioner Brown moves approval. Any discussion on the motion? Please cast your votes.
And what's your point?
Motion passes.
Next are the routine action items, which consist of items 4 through, except those items that have previously been deleted, and item number 8, which will be heard separately. These items may be considered together in one motion and are subject to the conditions listed with each agenda item. In addition, we have the following amendments and/or comments. Item 4, UC 18592, Paradise and Winchester Town Boards approved subject to 6 months to review. Staff received 7 cards in approval and 1 in protest. Item 7, WS 18464, Enterprise Town Board recommended approval. Staff received 3 cards in protest. Item 9, ZC 18602, staff requests the deletion of the first set of Public Works Development Review conditions. Staff received 1 card in approval and 2 in protest. Item 10, VS 18601, staff received 3 cards in protest. Any person who does not agree with the conditions recommended by staff should request that the item be removed from this portion of the agenda and be heard separately when the public hearing is open. Additionally, items that are recommended for denial or with different conditions of approval by the respective town boards are not automatically removed from the routine action agenda. If you wish to speak on any item on the routine action agenda, you must come forward and request the board remove the item from the routine action agenda and have the item heard separately. With these amendments and with no objection from the audience, the routine action portion of the agenda stands ready for your approval.
We are going to hear item number 8 separately. Does anyone in the gallery wish to hear another item separately? Any commissioners want to hear another item separately? Seeing no one, do I have a motion to approve the routine action items with the exception of item number 8 being heard separately? That motion is from Commissioner Brager. Any discussion? Please cast your votes. Motion passes.
For the audience's information, anyone who wishes to speak on an item should move to the first couple of rows and be prepared to speak as each item is heard. If there are several speakers on one item, it's suggested that a single representative be appointed to present the issues. The next item on the agenda is item number 8, ZC 18206, holdover zone change to reclassify 16.5 acres from RE Rural Estates Residential AE 60 zone to MD Design Manufacturing AE 60 zone in the CMA Design Overlay District. Design review for proposed office warehouse complex, generally located on the north side of Post Road, 300 feet east of Tenaya Way within Spring Valley. Staff recommended approval on this, and the applicant has submitted additional conditions be added. They are, number 1, remove parking spaces along the block walls of APNs 163, 34, 710, 009, and 010. Plant 24-inch box Texas mountain laurel trees within the modified intense landscape buffer along APNs 163, 34, 710, 09, and 010. The double row of trees shall be staggered and planted 15 feet apart. 3, trees shall be planted by a licensed professional landscaper and replaced in accordance with Chapter 30.64.030D3. Number 4, all wall lights and pole lights on the west elevation or parking lot of building number 1 shall be shielded with lighting directed downward and not onto existing residential lots. Item 5, striping and or signs to be used in vehicular parking lot area adjacent to building number 1 so trucks do not use drive aisle on western boundary of site. Item 6, reduce height of north half of building number 1 where across from APNs 163, 34, 710, 009, and 010 to 30 feet, remaining height of building number 1 to be at 38 feet. Trash enclosures to be located a minimum of 120 feet away from west boundary. No windows to be located on the west elevation of building 1 above 20 feet in height. Construction of the project limited to daylight hours as defined by Title 30. 10, construct a decorative CMU wall adjacent to the existing block wall of APNs 163, 34, 710, 009, and 10. Minimum height of decorative CMU block wall to be 8 feet as measured in height from the easternmost portion of lots of APN 163, 34, 710, 009, and 010. The color of the decorative CMU block wall facing west shall be similar in color and texture to the existing block wall. 11, traffic study shall include the existing condition of Tenaya Way.
Ms. Lazovich, good morning.
Good morning. Jennifer Lazovich, 1980 Festival Plaza Drive, here today on behalf of the applicant. If you could look at the overhead. Thank you. So the property owner owns the entire portion of the area outlined in yellow and labeled as site. Half of the property is in the light blue color, which is master plan for BDRP, and then the northern half of the property is in the pink color, which is master plan for office professional. The application that's before you today is limited only to a conforming zone change for the portion that's in the blue, and that is BDRP. We're asking for a zone change to go to MD. One of the critical points that I need to make about this application, we've been working on it for quite some time. There are residents who live over here just to the west of us, some even adjacent to our boundary, and we've been working with them quite some time. The biggest issue has been the foundation fact that this property was once owned by the airport and subsequently sold. And when it was sold with a deed restriction that prohibited any form of residential. During the conforming zone change application process and in trying to work with the neighbors, I reached out personally several times to the airport at the neighbors' request to see if there would be an option for this property to have a deed modification brought before this board at some point to allow residential to be built there. And I was assured both verbally and in writing that because of the noise contour areas, because of where the property is located, this would not be one of the properties that the airport would consider modifying the deed restriction to allow residential. So as we stand here today, the conforming zone change that we're bringing forward to you does not have the option to go residential. So what we did at that point is we attempted to make as many modifications to our original design as we could to address what we hoped we could for the neighbors and for the residents, again, some of who live right here on this western boundary. This was the design as we started when we filed several months ago. It had 5 buildings, and this was the area where all the loading docks were. After the first neighborhood meeting and subsequently when we got to the town board, this design, if we were going to go forward with the MD, didn't protect the residents on the east as well as it should. So we since revised the plan, and Ms. Amundsen read in a number of conditions, but I'll kind of walk you through on this site plan what they mean. This is an attempt to address the concerns and particularly the buffer to the residents that live on the western side of us. So to start, the major thing we did is now we only have 4 buildings, and we took the buildings that had been like this and we moved building 1 to sit here. The only thing that will face west will be the front of the buildings. There are no loading docks. There is nothing over on that side or the western side of the building that has anything to do with where the loading docks are, trash enclosures, anything that is more intense. That is all on the east side of the building, moving east. We also put this building a little closer to the western boundary in order to shrink the driveway space that goes here, because we want it to only be for cars. We don't want trucks to go over there. So we have agreed to subsequent conditions that Ms. Amundsen read into the record, that we would do striping and other things to make sure that trucks didn't go this way, but we also designed it with not enough space for them to feel like they could go that way even if they ignored the striping. In meetings that we had with the neighbors in August, it was brought up that right here are the homes right here. So it was brought up that could we remove the parking spaces immediately next to their homes and put in a double row of trees. So that this exhibit and the conditions that Ms. Amundsen read into the record reflect that. There are no parking spaces right here next to their homes. We have a double row of trees, and we specifically talked about a kind of tree. It was actually from a project in Commissioner Breaker's area where the neighbors in that one researched that Texas mountain laurel trees were not messy, were evergreen. And while they're not the fastest growing tree, those are usually the Mondale pines, they have the benefit of looking nicer, being a prettier tree, staying green, and not being as messy. So we specifically called out a double row of Texas mountain laurel trees right in here. We pulled a condition from the office project that's built south of where the neighbors are, that the trees needed to be planted by a licensed professional landscaper and replaced in accordance with a section of your code that says if they fail, you have a certain amount of time to replace any trees that died. On the lighting, for all lighting, both on the wall of the building and any lighting in the parking lot, the next condition talks about making sure that it is shielded with lighting directed downward and not onto existing residential lots. So wall lighting on building 1, as well as any parking lot lighting, that condition is meant to cover that. As I mentioned on the next one earlier, we had striping to ensure that trucks don't go over here. It is merely intended for vehicular cars only. The other thing that we were asked, and we couldn't quite get down as far as the neighbors asked us to do, but the northern half of building number 1, which is across from the residential homes, we were asked by the neighbors if we could go to 28 feet. All the buildings when we started were at a height of 38 feet. So what we did is we worked with our architect and we tried to figure out as low as we could bring this portion of the building. And so we are asking in the next condition that the north half of building number 1 across from these two APNs would be reduced to a height of 30 feet. The remaining portion of the building, which is this portion across from an existing office building, could be 38 feet. We have both shown on our plan and put in a condition that says trash enclosures to be located a minimum of 120 feet away from the west boundary. The truth is they're all on the other side of building 1. So they are east of building 1. We don't have any trash enclosures anywhere over here. For the elevations, we agreed to a condition that there would be no windows that would be on the, there we go. I can pull up some. We agreed to a condition that there would be no windows above, on building number 1, above 20 feet in height as facing west. Again, we were never proposing that, but we wanted to also put that in a condition so that there would be no windows that would be on a second story. There is no second story in these buildings, but further protection to the neighbors west of us. We agreed to a condition that construction of the project would be limited to daylight hours as defined by Title 30. And then the neighbors specifically asked that we add a second block wall right adjacent to where their wall is that would be 8 feet as measured in height from anywhere on their eastern boundary. So if you were standing on the easternmost portion of either one of their lots, our wall would be measured to be 8 feet. Their wall, I believe, is 6 feet, but they were worried about grade differences. We understood that, so our wall might need to be higher on one side, but all that matters is from their side, it is a minimum of 8 feet. One of the big issues that we talked about throughout this process was Tenaya Way. Tenaya Way remains closed right now, and the concern from the residents has been for a long time, and with this project, and I'm sure others, that somehow this project would dictate that Tenaya Way be opened up. So we agreed to a condition that said traffic studies shall include the existing condition of Tenaya Way. We did speak with Public Works about that. What that really means is that our traffic study considers the current condition of Tenaya, which means we couldn't contemplate putting trucks traveling northbound on Tenaya. We can't do it today. Our traffic study won't consider it being open in the future. And then Ms. Amundsen also read into the record a new condition from Public Works that to the effect of the traffic study shall include a signal warrant analysis for Post Road and Rainbow. There is a chance that with our development and maybe others, that there could be a signal that is warranted at some point in the future at Post Road and Rainbow, so we do also agree to that condition. This has been a long process working with the neighbors. I will tell you publicly they have been great to work with. This is hard for them. It is hard for us. We actually tried to do a master plan amendment that would have allowed us to do residential here several years ago, and again, the airport has been consistent in their position that they are not supportive of any residential there. So we just could not get on the same page with that, but I hope we have, the neighbors can see that we've tried our very best with the type of application this is to do what we can to mitigate their concerns, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Lesovich. Does that complete your presentation?
Yes, sir.
Ken, I've got a bunch of cards here, and I want to acknowledge that we did meet, you and Tiffany and I and all the neighbors met in the Joshua room one day, and I also called the airport, and they have absolutely zero appetite to lift that deed restriction, so it's just never going to get lifted. So this is where we're at today. So I want to open the public hearing at this time on item number 8, and I've got some cards. Anyone wishing to come forward, please do. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good.
I'm going to talk like an auctioneer because I'm supposed to have 3 minutes, and I've got 4 minutes to say. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Sharon Samsel, 7302 Sundown Glen Avenue. I'm on the Sky Ranch board, and I'm the person on our board that deals with development outside of our walls. I try to ensure that we get proper transitional development on our borders. My husband, Greg, delivered the packets to your office that gave you our thought process on why these deed-restricted properties should be open for reconsideration and our concerns on the application before you now. My family is also one of the most affected houses in this particular proposal. Our neighbors and HOA have worked with the applicant and find ourselves at an impasse. Our neighborhood of 100 houses feel that putting a manufacturing development with loading docks for big rigs, no normal hours of operation, noise, traffic, and safety concerns, and substantial loss of property values, initially estimated at 10 to 20%, with substantial loss of buyer pool, make this an unfit development next to us. Because of the lack of oversight in the early planning of the CMA overlay, there was no thoughtful consideration into neighborhoods like us that would safeguard us from proposals like this. That, coupled with the deed restriction that the DOA has put on this land, has led to the problem we see here today. We look to the south and see the new development of Richmond American Homes, also under the flight path but insulated from the airport noise and recently approved of. If you cannot see a way to include properties like this one we are out talking about today on our eastern border when deed restrictions are opened up again for consideration, I believe the commission is being put into a position that appears prejudicial. It makes for unsound policy decisions between applicants, homeowners, and yourselves. Today we have an applicant that is wanting to build an industrial complex that in its entirety is over 250,000 square feet, complete with big rig loading docks and no hours of operation. Our joint meeting with Commissioner Sisolak, the developer, and his attorney netted the slightest reduction of height in only half of the closest buildings, some double rows of trees, a dividing wall, and a confirmation that they would follow Title 30 building rules. The thing most important to our family neighborhood and those neighborhoods to the north of us, like considering office professional zoning, which will come in the future for this applicant next to us, was ignored. Kind consideration of no loading docks on buildings close to us was also ignored. Today, we are asking the Commission if a big rig was delivering a payload at 3 a.m. with all the engine noise, backup beeping, and roll-up door noise on the other side of your property, would you be okay with that? Our conviction is that you would protect your family's need for a healthful rest just like we are, and fight like we are for the peaceful enjoyment of our neighborhood. Although we are encouraged by the Spring Valley Advisory Board's unanimous denial of this project, and we followed the advice from our own legal counsel, we find ourselves here today. May I finish? Or?
I'm going to give you just a few seconds, because
Yes.
if I let you go too far, then everybody's going to want to go to 4 minutes, and that causes a problem.
Okay. I think there's a lot of my neighbors here that don't want to speak. Can I take a couple minutes of their time?
No, it doesn't work like that. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. I've been taking phone calls, emails, and texts for months answering questions from the neighborhood of Sky Ranch that can't believe this is happening. The other cities that are growing like ours, there's large industrial areas that are planned smartly for this kind of development by avoiding existing neighborhoods. Our city seems to have its share of bad spot zoning, perhaps because of deed restrictions and innate conflicts of policy like we're experiencing here today. We, in solidarity, ask that this be sent back for further compromise to include professional zoning and other conditions that would make this a more proper transitional zone. We ask for your denial today.
Thank you for your comments.
Yes.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
Good morning.
Morning.
So this morning I got an email from Wade Simpson.
I've got to ask you, you've got to
Greg Preston, 7302 Sundown Glen Avenue. I live with Sharon.
Okay.
Wade Simpson is one of our neighbors. You know him. He's an architect here in town, and he wrote, and he can't be here. He had a prior engagement, so he said, "Would you read this?" And I said, "Sure." My name is Wade Simpson. I live at 7491 Shadow Estates Way, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89113. I served as our HOA president 14 years ago when we worked with the LiveWork developers to the south of our community to successfully compromise in creating development that could meet both parties' needs. I understand there's been much work done by both parties on our board and the developers' representatives concerning this proposed development. In reviewing the current plan before you, I have major concern regarding the vehicular circulation and safety for our community. Please continue to keep separate any traffic from development to the south, east, and potentially west from our residential neighborhood. This request today applies directly to the separation at Tenaya. I would continue to request a large buffer between the neighborhood and any non-compatible adjacent development. Thank you, Wade Simpson, Simpson Culture Studio.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
Good morning. My name is William Hitchcock. I live at 7301 Sundown Glen. And I want to give you an idea of why I moved to Las Vegas in 1994. I want to take you back to this date in 1968. I was a first lieutenant flying F-4Ds in Southeast Asia. On this date, I had flown my 155th of 180 missions and the 77th missions of the 101 I'd fly in North Vietnam. I retired from the Air Force in 1988 or 1986 after serving 20 years, 7 months, and 1 day. In 1994, our family suffered the tragedy when we lost our youngest daughter in an automobile accident while she was attending college in Santa Barbara. I needed to move, and Marcus and Millichap opened an office here, and I was selected one of the 3 agents to move here. I flew into Nellis on a regular basis in the Air Force, and I was concerned whether I could make a living in a town that's known for entertainment. It's a town known for business too, and I did very well. The wife had to sell her home and her business. When we finally got to Las Vegas, we were able to find homes and new subdivisions, and we looked for several years until we found the one that we now live on. It is directly adjacent to the subject property. The orientation of my home is very critical because the master bedroom faces east, and for the last 15 years, nearly every day I could get up and see the sunrise. They're building this project here, and I wanted to ask the question, what if the project fails? What if, because of all the congestion it creates and all the noise and the pollution it creates, people decide not to put their supplies there, and the 18-wheelers can't get in there and move around? What if it fails? Then you're going to have a 38-foot tall white elephant that didn't work. There are numerous locations throughout the valley where you can put this same project, which would have much easier access and not inconvenient everybody else that's there, including the businesses and especially the homeowners. Where I live now is the last place I'll ever live. I am 75 years old, and I don't know how many sunrises I will see again. So please, I urge you to turn down this approval as this neighborhood board did unanimously. I will then know that I did not get shot down on the last mission of my life. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and thank you for your service. Anyone else?
Morning.
Good morning.
Kirk Rainbolt, 7342 Sundown Glen Avenue. I live on the northeast corner of Tenaya and Sundown Glen. My concern and what I'd like to speak to the commission today about is the traffic primarily. I'd probably be most affected by the traffic if, for whatever reason, Tenaya is opened. Up until this point, Commissioner Sisolak has been very helpful in his office, very helpful in keeping Tenaya closed on a temporary basis. Now, they have been clear that that's a temporary, and in the end of the day, the traffic department is the one that's going to decide whether or not that is open or that is closed. As part of the conditions, you've said you could create a traffic study, but I'm not sure what the purpose of the traffic study would be, because if the traffic study says, oh yes, we need to open it, then it's going to get open. It's like closing the barn door after the cows are gone. I mean, if it's after the point and the project is already approved, I'm not sure if that serves us any purpose. You know, it is a buffer currently between the MD zoning that's on the south side and the residential that's on the north side. And if we don't maintain that buffer, we're going to have a parade of FedEx trucks that are located down the street on post and ambulances that are down the street on post coming through our neighborhood. There was a short 30 to 60 day period when that road was open in the 15 years that I have lived in that house, and in that 30 to 60 days it was endless commercial vehicles, 50, 60 miles an hour constantly all day long. This commission, or the members of this commission, are not the ones that allowed those houses to be built in an area that they probably shouldn't have been built in. But the commission in whole is responsible for allowing those houses. Now we're asking to be protected. We're asking for us to be protected by decisions made by other commissions. That's what we're asking for. What I find most interesting is I've never seen a situation where the developer and the homeowners and the commission all want the same thing. We all agree we just want to build houses and we could live happily ever after. And I've heard all the stories and the concerns and the airport's unwillingness to have discussions. And so I guess my thought would be, can you vote against the airport, and can you override the airport, or you don't want to override the airport? My understanding is the airport waves a big stick. They generate a lot of revenue. We find it not in our interest to override the airport. That's not something that you typically do. But this is not an isolated situation. This is going to continue time after time after time in the airport overlay. This is not going away. You've got commercial on top of residential, and you're going to be